The chopper burst into flames 15 stories above the ridge, blades shattering in a spectacular explosion that turned the Balkan peaks into daylight. Staff Sergeant Adeline Parker hit the dirt as the shockwave punched her chest, debris showering down everywhere. Her radio crackled with the pilot's voice before cutting to silence as the burning wreck whipped into the canyon, taking her ride home and 4 fellow rangers with it. She tried reaching the other birds that dropped them off. Nothing but static. Then a broken voice came through. "This is Lid aircraft. Heavy fire from missile launchers everywhere. Can't come get you. You're stuck for at least half a day. Good luck out there." Adeline scanned her surroundings. She was stranded 2 miles above sea level on a ridge deep in contested territory, 9 miles past enemy lines where hostile fighters controlled everything. Her 5-person team had walked into a trap during insertion. 2 died in the helicopter. 2 more fell in the first ground attack. Now she was completely alone. Her orders were clear: sneak behind enemy positions, find the leader coordinating mass killings, and paint his location for jets to bomb. The target was hiding in a fortress another 2 miles uphill at even higher elevation. Getting there meant scaling sheer cliffs that her dead teammates were supposed to help her climb with proper gear. She had her rifle with 8 spare magazines, her pistol, 4 grenades, and a radio that might work from higher ground. What she didn't have was climbing rope, teammates, or any real chance of making it. But she had something the enemy never expected: Army Ranger training and a stubborn refusal to let her team die for nothing. Below, vehicle engines rumbled. Enemy patrols racing toward the crash site, hunting for survivors. Above, the mountain rose like a Purin's wall. Most soldiers would give up or hide. Adeline started climbing. What unfolded over the next 8 hours would show that the deadliest weapon on any battlefield isn't guns or numbers. It's a ranger who's been backed into a corner with nothing left but an impossible mission to finish alone. But before we reveal how she scaled a vertical cliff under gunfire, wiped out an entire compound with limited bullets, and called in an airstrike that changed everything, drop a comment telling us your location and hit that subscribe button. This story proves Rangers never quit, never surrender, and never walk away from unfinished business. Now let's dive in. The mission went sideways from the first second. Intelligence claimed the mountain fortress was barely defended, maybe 8 or 10 fighters at most. Intelligence was dead wrong. When 3 Blackhawks crested the ridge at sunrise, they flew straight into a killing field. Surface-to-air missiles lit up the morning sky. Adeline's helicopter took a direct hit. She got thrown clear from the blast, smashing hard onto rocky slopes, tumbling 60 feet before catching herself on a ledge. Looking up, both team members who jumped with her were gone. Martinez hit the rocks at a bad angle. Neck snapped instantly. Stevens caught shrapnel from the explosion, bleeding out before Adeline could crawl to him. The other helicopters scattered under intense fire, barely escaping over the next ridge. Now, with dawn breaking, Adeline assessed her situation from behind a cluster of boulders, 600 feet below where they got ambushed. What she had: military rifle with scope, 8 magazines holding 240 rounds total, pistol with 3 magazines, 45 rounds, 4 fragmentation grenades, combat knife, basic survival gear, short-range radio, and medical supplies. The problem's 9 miles behind enemy lines in the Balkans. No backup for at least 12 hours. Enemy patrols closing in on the crash. Need to scale vertical rock without equipment. Mission target still 2 miles away at higher altitude. Enemy fortress now on full alert. Most soldiers would call this situation hopeless. Adeline called it just another Tuesday. She checked her rifle, counted her magazines, and started moving uphill. The enemy would expect survivors to flee downhill, trying to escape toward friendly territory. She headed up toward the target because Rangers don't abandon missions just because things get tough. The first stretch wasn't technical climbing, just steep hiking through boulders and loose rock. Adeline moved quickly, using terrain for cover, staying low. Behind her, enemy patrols reached the crash site, shouting in Serbian and broken English. The fighters controlling this area were a mix of former military and foreign mercenaries, well armed with Serbian and Russian weapons. At higher elevation, everything changed. The slope became a near-vertical rock wall, the kind requiring ropes, harnesses, and protection gear, the kind her dead teammates had been carrying. Adeline studied the face, 200 feet of exposed climbing before reaching the next ledge system. Minimal handholds, sections covered in ice. One slip meant death. She secured her rifle across her chest, tightened her gear, and started up without hesitation. Free soloing climbing without safety equipment was something she trained for during Ranger mountain courses. Not extensively, but enough to understand the basics. Test every grip, keep 3 contact points, trust your training. Control your fear. Her fingers found a crack. She pulled herself upward. One move, then another. The rock felt frozen, her hands already going numb, but she kept pushing. 20 feet up, 30 feet. The ground dropped away beneath her, but she refused to look down. Looking down was for people who doubted themselves. At 40 feet she heard voices below. The enemy patrol spotted her on the wall. Gunfire erupted. Rifle rounds sparked off the rock around her. One passed so close she felt the air pressure, but she was 40 feet up a vertical face. They'd need incredible aim to hit a moving target at that angle and distance. She kept climbing. 50 feet. The shooting stopped. They realized they were wasting bullets, but now they were following. She could hear them scrambling up the slope, searching for an easier path to get above her. Adeline reached the ledge at 60 feet, hauled herself over and immediately took a defensive position. The enemy patrol 4 fighters were working their way along the slope below, trying to outflank her. She took a knee, brought her rifle to her shoulder, steadied her breathing. At this distance, with the scope and her training, this was almost routine. First shot, center mass on the lead fighter. Down. Second shot, the one behind him. Down. The other 2 scattered, firing wildly back. Adeline shifted position, tracked the third fighter as he dove for cover. When he popped up to shoot, she was ready. 1 shot. Down. The fourth fighter was smarter. He found solid cover and stayed hidden. Adeline waited patiently. After 2 minutes he made his mistake, shifted to get a better angle. She put 2 rounds through the gap in his cover. 4 enemies eliminated, but the gunfire would bring reinforcement. She continued upward. At higher elevation, Adeline hit the section that should have required specialized climbing equipment. A 300-foot vertical wall, smooth rock with minimal features, ice coating the few handholds available. This section should have been impossible without gear. She stood at the base, staring up at what looked like an unclimbable surface. Most people would turn back. Adeline saw a route, a thin crack system running up the left side, barely visible, maybe only inches deep. Crack climbing without protection is considered insane even by expert climbers. You wedge your fingers or hands into cracks and pull yourself up using pure strength and technique. One slip meant a fatal fall. Adeline had trained for this during mountain warfare courses. She'd free-climbed crack systems in Colorado, Washington, and Scotland during joint exercises. She'd learned to read rock, to find holds where others saw nothing. She started up the crack. The first section required jamming her hands into the crack and using friction and pressure to support her weight. Painful, brutal on the hands, requiring enormous grip strength. But rangers are She pulled herself upward, one hand jam at a time, feet pushing on the smooth rock, finding tiny edges most people would miss. 60 feet up the crack, 90 feet. Her hands were shredded, blood making the holds slippery, but she kept moving. No option to stop, no option to rest. Stopping meant falling. Falling meant mission failure. At 130 feet, she heard helicopters, enemy aircraft circling the area, searching. One passed directly overhead, close enough she could see the door gunner scanning the slopes below, but he wasn't looking. Nobody expected someone to be free climbing a vertical wall during combat. 150 feet, the crack was thinning, becoming harder to use. She switched to finger locks, wedging just her fingers into the crack, pulling her entire body weight with finger strength alone. This was the kind of climbing that destroys people's hands, that most climbers wouldn't attempt even with safety gear. Adeline did it because the mission demanded it, and rangers don't quit because something is difficult. 230. She could see the top of the wall, 60 feet more. Her forearms burned, her fingers screamed, but she kept moving. 290 feet, 30 feet from the top. That's when she heard voices directly above her, enemy fighters positioned at the top of the climb, having found an easier route up the backside. She couldn't stop, couldn't descend, could only climb up into whatever waited. At 310 feet, with 15 feet left, she saw a boot appear over the edge. An enemy fighter looking down, spotting her. An American here. A rifle muzzle appeared over the edge, pointing down at her. Adeline did something that would be taught at ranger school for years afterward. She released one hand from the crack, drew her pistol from her thigh holster, and fired 4 rounds upward, all while hanging from just one hand jammed in a crack. 300 feet above the ground. The enemy fighter fell backward, his rifle tumbling past Adeline as she holstered her pistol and kept climbing. She pulled herself over the top edge, just as 2 more fighters appeared. They were bringing their weapons around, but Adeline was already moving. She rolled over the edge, came up with her rifle, and fired controlled bursts. Both fighters dropped, but there were more. She could hear them. An entire patrol, maybe 8 to 10 fighters, closing in on her position at the top of the wall. Adeline read the terrain in 2 seconds. She was on a narrow ledge with rock walls on 3 sides. A natural trap if she stayed here. Above her, another 600 feet of steep terrain led to the next level. Below was the 300-foot drop she just climbed. The enemy approached from the one open side. She pulled 2 grenades from her vest, set them on the ground, pulled the pins but held the safety handles. Then she grabbed a 3rd grenade, pulled the pin, and threw it toward the approaching enemy. She counted 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. The explosion echoed across the mountain. Screams, confusion. While the enemy was disoriented, Adeline released the handles on the 2 grenades at her feet and ran, sprinting up the steep slope above the ledge. Behind her, the 2 grenades exploded, triggering a rock slide on the unstable slope. Tons of rock and debris cascaded down the mountain, burying the ledge and blocking the route behind her. The enemy patrol was cut off. They'd need to find another way up, which would take hours. Adeline kept climbing toward her target. At higher elevation, Adeline found an observation spot with clear views of the target fortress. She was 2,000 feet away, slightly below the compound's elevation. She pulled out her binoculars and studied the target. The intelligence had been partially accurate. There was a fortified compound built into the mountainside. What intelligence missed was the scale. This wasn't a small outpost. It was a full military position with 20 to 30 visible fighters. Heavy weapons including machine guns and mortars. Fortified bunkers carved into the rock. Multiple defensive positions. Vehicle access via a mountain road on the far side. Communications equipment including satellite systems. Armed trucks with mounted heavy weapons. And somewhere in that compound was the target, the commander coordinating ethnic cleansing operations that had murdered hundreds of civilians in the valleys below. Adeline's mission was to mark the target for an airstrike, but with enemy air defenses active, no aircraft could approach. She needed to destroy or neutralize those air defenses first. She studied the compound through her binoculars, identifying the missile positions. 2 sites, both with shoulder-fired missiles, likely Russian-made systems. If she could eliminate those positions, aircraft could approach for the strike. 1 ranger against a fortified compound with 30 enemies. The odds would have made most people quit. Adeline started planning her assault. She noticed something else through her binoculars. A group of civilians, maybe 20 people, held in cages near the eastern edge of the compound. Prisoners, probably from the villages this group had been terrorizing. Her mission parameters didn't include civilian rescue, but leaving innocent people in cages while calling in an airstrike wasn't something she could do. The mission just got more complicated. Adeline moved into position 1,000 feet from the compound's eastern edge. This side faced the valley and had fewer defenders. They weren't expecting threats from the direction that required climbing vertical rock faces. She found a rocky outcrop that gave her cover and excellent sightlines into the compound. She set up her rifle with the scope and began identifying priority target. First priority, the missile positions. She could see both, one on the northern edge, one on the southern perimeter. Each position had 2 fighters and the missile systems. Second priority, the guards near the prisoner cages. She counted 4 fighters actively guarding the civilian. Third priority, communications. She spotted the satellite equipment and radio antennas. Destroying those would prevent them from calling for reinforcements. Fourth priority, heavy weapons. The machine gun positions would be able to pin her down if she didn't neutralize them early. She had 8 magazines, 240 rounds. She needed to make every shot count. Adeline controlled her breathing, settled into her shooting position and began the assault. Shot 1 and 2, northern missile position, first fighter center mass, down. Shot 3 and 4, northern missile position, second fighter. He was reacting, bringing his weapon around, 2 to the chest. Down. The compound erupted in chaos. Fighters scrambled, trying to locate the threat. But Adeline was 1,000 feet away, partially concealed, and they weren't expecting a single shooter. Shot 5 through 7, southern missile position, first fighter. He was diving for cover. She led him slightly, fired. 2 hits, 1 miss, down. Shot 8 through 10, southern missile position, second fighter. He'd made it to cover but exposed himself trying to reach the missile system. 3 rounds, down. Both missile positions eliminated. Aircraft could now approach. Shot 11 through 13, guard tower near prisoner cage. The guard was bringing a machine gun to bear on her position. 3 rounds. He fell from the tower, but now the compound knew they were under attack. The heavy machine gun positions opened fire. Hundreds of rounds chewed up the rocks around Adeline's position. She dropped below her cover as bullets tore through the air where she'd been. She low-crawled 60 feet to a new position, came up behind different rocks. The gunners were still firing at her old location. Shot 14 through 17, western machine gun position. The gunner was focused on her old spot. She put 4 rounds into him and his assistant. Both down. Shot 18 through 21, eastern machine gun position. These gunners had better awareness. They were already swinging their weapon toward her new position. She fired faster, less precise but effective. 4 rounds, both gunners down. Heavy weapons neutralized. Return fire was intense now. Rifles, a machine gun she hadn't spotted, even a mortar that started dropping shells near her position. She was taking fire from multiple directions. Pinned down, but she'd accomplished Phase 1 missile sights down. Prisoner guards reduced. Time for Phase 2. Adeline pulled her last grenade, threw it toward a cluster of fighters who'd advanced from the compound, trying to flank her. The explosion scattered them, buying her seconds. She broke cover and ran, not away from the compound but toward it. The aggressive movement caught the enemy by surprise. They expected her to retreat under fire. She was charging their position. She covered 150 feet before they adjusted their fire. Rounds cracked past her head, impacted at her feet, but she kept moving. At 800 feet from the compound, she dove into a depression that gave her cover from most angles. She'd cut the distance in half. At this range, her rifle with the scope was devastatingly accurate. She began systematically engaging targets. Fighters appearing in doorways, 2 shots each. A fighter on a rooftop, 3 shots. A group trying to organize a counterattack, controlled bursts into the center of the group. She was through her 3rd magazine, into her 4th. 120 rounds expended. Approximately 15 enemy fighters down, but more kept appearing. The compound had more defenders than intelligence reported. A rocket launcher whooshed toward her position. She rolled left as it impacted where she'd been, the explosion showering her with debris. Her ears rang, but she kept fighting. Shot 60 through 65, armed truck with mounted machine gun being positioned to fire on her. She emptied half a magazine into the gunner, and the driver visible through the windshield. The truck crashed into a wall. Her radio crackled. Any station, this is lead aircraft. Air defense is neutralized. We can provide close air support if you can mark the target. Authentic. Adeline keyed her radio while firing at an emerging enemy. Lead aircraft. Authenticate Charlie 79er. I'm 800 feet east of the compound. Missile sites are down, but I've got civilians in cages on the eastern edge. Need you to hold fire until I can extract them. Negative. Ground unit. Mission is to eliminate the target. Civilian rescue is not authorized. Lead aircraft. I'm not asking permission. I'm telling you I'm extracting civilians before you drop bombs. Give me 8 minutes. Ground unit. You don't have authorization to. Then court-martial me when I get back. But I'm not leaving civilians to die in an airstrike. 8 minutes. Out. She switched frequencies before they could argue further. Now she had to cover 800 feet of open ground, eliminate remaining defenders, free the prisoners and get them clear of the strike zone in 8 minutes. Adeline checked her remaining ammunition. 3 magazines left. She'd need to make them last. She sprinted toward the compound, firing on the move. A fighter appeared in a window. She put 2 rounds through it without breaking stride. Another fighter emerged from behind a wall. She transitioned smoothly, fired, kept running. At 300 feet she pulled her pistol and fired with her left hand while her right hand worked her rifle. Shooting with both hands, engaging targets on both sides simultaneously. 2 fighters went down from her pistol, another from her rifle. At 150 feet she was inside the compound perimeter. Close quarters battle now. She transitioned to rapid room clearing mode, checking corners, scanning angles, engaging threats as they appeared. A fighter burst from a doorway. She put 3 rounds into him before he could bring his weapon up. 2 fighters tried to ambush her, from opposite sides. She dove forward into a roll, came up firing in both directions. Both went down. She reached the prisoner cages 75 feet from the eastern edge. 4 civilians were still locked inside, huddled in fear. The cage locks were simple padlocks. She shot them off with her pistol, then pulled the cage doors open. Go, run down the mountain. American forces are coming. They stared at her terrified, not understanding English. She pointed down the slope, using the Serbian she'd learned for this mission. Run. Go. They understood. They ran. But 3 fighters had spotted her at the cages. They were advancing, weapons up. Adeline had nowhere to hide. The cages offered no cover. She stood her ground, brought her rifle up, and engaged. She hit the first fighter twice, center mass. Down. The second fighter was firing as he advanced. Rounds sparked off the metal cages. She felt one tug at her sleeve, another impact her plate carrier. She ignored the hits and returned fire. 3 rounds. Down. The third fighter was smarter. He'd taken cover and was laying down heavy fire. She couldn't advance, couldn't retreat. The prisoners were still evacuating behind her. She was pinned with limited ammunition and no cover. Then she heard it. The distinctive roar of an attack jet's engines. The close air support had arrived early. Adeline keyed her radio. Lead aircraft civilians are clear. Light up the main building. Danger close to my position. Copy that. Guns. Guns. The jet's cannon opened fire. A 7-barrel rotary cannon that fired thousands of rounds per minute. The sound was like nothing else in warfare. A deep roar that vibrated through your entire body. The main compound building simply disintegrated under the onslaught. The third fighter who'd had Adeline pinned was caught in the edge of the gun run and ceased to exist. Main building destroyed. Marking for missiles. Adeline pulled her laser marker, aimed it at the communications building, where intelligence said the target had his command center. Target marked. Missiles away. 2 missiles streaked in from the jet. The first hit the communications building dead center. The second hit moments later, ensuring nothing survived. The explosions were massive. The entire command section of the compound was obliterated. But Adeline wasn't done. Through the smoke and chaos, she spotted movement. 5 fighters trying to escape through a rear exit, carrying what looked like documents and equipment. One of them matched the target's description from the mission brief. She couldn't let them escape, not after everything. Adeline sprinted after them, rifle up. The fighters saw her coming and opened fire. She dove behind a burning vehicle as rounds sparked off the metal. She came up firing. 2 of the escorts went down immediately. The remaining 3 scattered, 2 running for the tree line, 1 the target trying to reach a vehicle. Adeline tracked the target through her scope. He was 150 feet away, running hard. She controlled her breathing, led him slightly and fired. He stumbled but kept running. Body armor. She fired again, aiming lower. The round caught him in the leg. He went down hard. The 2 remaining escorts turned back to help him. Bad decision. Adeline fired controlled bursts. Both went down. She advanced on the target, weapon ready. He was reaching for a pistol when she kicked it away. "Don't move," she said in English. Then Serbian. He stayed down, bleeding from his leg wound. She zip-tied his hands, applied a tourniquet to his leg. He was worth more alive for intelligence purposes. Then keyed her radio. "Lead aircraft. Target is captured. I repeat, captured, not killed. Need immediate extraction. My position, 1 prisoner. Copy that. Black Hawk inbound, 2 minutes." Those 2 minutes felt like an hour. Adeline maintained security over the wounded target while scanning for additional threats. The compound was destroyed, burning, but enemy reinforcements could arrive any time. She heard engines, vehicles approaching on the mountain road. Enemy reinforcements were coming. "Lead aircraft. I've got enemy vehicles inbound. Need that bird now. 30 seconds. The vehicles were coming fast. 2 armed trucks with mounted machine guns. Maybe 20 fighters total. Adeline had 1 magazine left in her rifle, 28 rounds. The lead truck rounded the bend. She aimed carefully and put 10 rounds into the driver and engine block. The truck crashed into a tree. The second truck was smarter. It stopped at distance and the gunner opened fire with the mounted heavy machine gun. Rounds tore up the ground around Adeline's position. She grabbed the target and dragged him behind better cover. A concrete bunker that was still partially intact. Rounds hammered into the concrete, chipping away at her protection. She had 18 rounds left. 20 enemy fighters with at least 1 heavy machine gun. The odds were bad. But then she heard the most beautiful sound in the world, the thump of helicopter rotors. The Black Hawk came in fast and aggressive. Door gunners already engaging. Minigun fire ripped into the truck, shredding it and the fighters around it. Ground unit were landing hot. "Get that prisoner and get aboard now." Adeline grabbed the target, hoisted him up and ran for the landing helicopter. Enemy fighters were firing from the tree line, but the door gunners were suppressing them with devastating effect. She threw the target aboard, then jumped in herself as the helicopter lifted off. Rounds sparked off the armored hull but nothing penetrated. They were airborne, climbing fast, leaving the burning compound and dead enemies behind. The crew chief looked at her, covered in rock dust, blood and gunpowder residue. Uniform shredded but still maintaining security over the prisoner with her last magazine. "Ma'am, you're bleeding," he said, noticing the blood seeping through her sleeve. "Flesh wounds. The plate caught most of it." "I'm good. You climbed that mountain without equipment. Assaulted 30 fighters alone, rescued civilians and captured the target." "Ma'am, that's not good. That's legendary." Adeline just nodded, too exhausted to respond. She looked out at the mountain she'd climbed, the compound she'd destroyed, the impossible mission she'd completed after losing her entire team. Her hands were destroyed from the climbing. She had 3 gunshot wounds, all minor, stopped by her plate carrier or just flesh wounds. She'd expended 212 rounds of rifle ammunition, 33 rounds of pistol ammunition, and all 4 grenades. But the mission was complete. The target was captured. 20 civilians were saved. Her team's deaths had been avenged. As they flew toward friendly lines, she finally allowed herself to close her eyes and rest. 1 week later, the captured target provided intelligence that led to the arrest of 47 leaders and prevented 3 planned massacres. The documents recovered from the compound exposed an entire network of ethnic cleansing operations that stretched across 3 countries. The 20 civilians Adeline rescued testified at War Crimes Tribunal. Their testimony was instrumental in convicting multiple war criminals, including 2 generals and a political leader, who'd orchestrated the campaigns. Without their testimony, many perpetrators would have escaped justice. Adeline was awarded the Medal of Honor, the nation's highest military decoration, for her actions. The citation detailed her free climb without equipment, solo assault on a fortified compound, civilian rescue under fire, and capture of a high-value target after her entire team had been killed. The ceremony at the White House was attended by the families of her fallen teammates. Martinez's mother hugged Adeline and whispered, "Thank you for finishing what they started. Thank you for making their sacrifice matter." During the press conference that followed, a journalist asked how she'd found the strength to complete such an impossible mission alone. Rangers train for the absolute worst circumstances. Adeline said, "We train for equipment failure, for losing teammates, for being outnumbered and outgunned. What happened on that mountain was bad, but it wasn't outside the scope of what Rangers prepare for. My team started the mission, I finished it. That's what Rangers do. We don't leave missions incomplete, and we don't leave our teammates' sacrifice without meaning." Another journalist pressed, "But you went beyond your mission parameters. You risked the airstrike to save civilians who weren't part of your objective." "Rangers lead the way," Adeline replied firmly. "That means being first into danger. Yes, but it also means upholding the values we represent. I couldn't call in an airstrike that would kill innocent people locked in cages. My team wouldn't have wanted that either. We're warriors, but we're warriors with a moral compass. Sometimes the hardest part of a mission isn't the fighting. It's making the right decision when nobody's watching and nobody would know if you took the easier path." She returned to the 75th Ranger Regiment and continued serving, declining offers to move into training roles or staff positions. She wanted to stay operational, to keep leading Rangers in combat. But the story of her climb, the free solo ascent under fire, the solo assault, the civilian rescue, the target capture became legendary throughout Special Operations Forces worldwide. 6 months after her mission, Adeline was promoted and given command of her own Ranger fire team. She trained them obsessively in mountain warfare, equipment-free operations, and ethical decision-making under pressure. During one mountain training exercise in Colorado, when a team member's climbing rope broke during an ascent, the other Rangers immediately called for rescue and began setting up a complex rope system to reach him. Adeline watched for 30 seconds, then started free climbing the face to reach the stranded Ranger. She reached him in 4 minutes, brought him down safely without any equipment, then gathered her team. "Rangers don't wait for perfect conditions or perfect equipment," she told them. "You train with gear so you're proficient, but you train without gear so you're capable." That Ranger was in danger. The fastest way to help him wasn't building a rope system. It was climbing. "So I climbed." That's what Rangers do. We solve problems with whatever resources we have available, including just our training and our bodies. The team member she'd rescued, a young private on his first field exercise, later said, "I was hanging on that wall, scared I was going to fall, and then I looked down and saw Staff Sergeant Parker climbing up to me without any equipment, just using her hands and feet. In that moment I understood what it really means to be a Ranger. It's not about the gear, it's not about having perfect conditions, it's about getting the job done no matter what." A small memorial was erected near the helicopter crash site, a stone monument with 5 names: Martinez, Stevens, Johnson, Williams, and Harper, the Rangers who started the mission. Below their names is a simple inscription: "Rangers lead the way." Adeline visits the memorial whenever she's in the region for training operations. She places her hand on each name and makes the same promise every time: "Your mission was completed. Your sacrifice mattered. You would be proud of how it ended." But the monument that truly honors their sacrifice isn't made of stone. It's made of doctrine, training, and mindset. The lessons from that mission are taught to every Ranger who goes through training. The techniques Adeline used: free climbing under fire, solo assault tactics, ethical decision-making under pressure, are now standard components of Ranger training. The story spread beyond special operations to conventional forces, to allied militaries, to armies worldwide. It became a case study not just in tactics but in leadership, in resilience, in maintaining moral standards under impossible conditions. A year after the mission, Adeline received a letter from one of the civilians she'd rescued, a young woman named Elena, who'd been held in those cages for 3 weeks, expecting to die. You appeared like an angel of death to our captors and an angel of mercy to us. Elena wrote, we had given up hope. We thought we would die in those cages or worse. Then you came from the mountain, alone, bleeding, fighting like a demon, and you freed us. You didn't have to. You were there to kill our captors, not to save us. But you saved us anyway. You risked everything to give us our lives back. My children are alive because of you. My husband is alive because of you. I am alive because of you. We will never forget. Thank you, Ranger. Adeline kept that letter in her pocket, carried it on every mission. When things got hard, when missions got complicated, when she had to make difficult decisions, she'd touch that letter and remember why Rangers do what they do. Not for glory, not for recognition, but because somewhere in the world there are people who need help, who need justice, who need someone willing to climb impossible mountains and fight impossible odds to do what's right. They'd left her stranded on a mountain peak at 2 miles elevation, with no equipment, no team, no support, and enemies closing in from all directions. She'd climbed 2,000 vertical feet of rock face with bleeding hands. She'd eliminated 2 missile sites with precision fire. She'd assaulted a fortified compound with 30 defenders and limited ammunition. She'd rescued 20 civilians while under fire. She'd captured a war criminal who would have escaped justice. Because that's what Rangers do. They adapt, they overcome, they complete the mission no matter what it takes. They do the right thing even when it's harder. They refuse to quit even when quitting would be understandable. And that mountain would remember forever the day one Ranger proved that impossible was just another word for mission. Accept it. The odds didn't matter. The circumstances didn't matter. The obstacles didn't matter. What mattered was the mission, the people who needed help, and the Ranger creed that had been drilled into her through years of training. Rangers lead the way. She'd led the way up an impossible mountain, through an impossible fight, to an impossible victory. And in doing so, she'd proven what every Ranger believes, but what that mountain made undeniable. There is no challenge that can't be overcome, no mission that can't be completed, no circumstance that justifies quit. Just training, determination, moral courage, and the absolute refusal to let impossible become reality. Staff Sergeant Adeline Parker had climbed without equipment, fought without support, and won without backup. Because Rangers don't need perfect conditions, they just need a mission, and the will to complete it. And that will, forged in training, proven in combat, honored in legacy, is what makes Rangers different. They don't accept impossible, they defeat it. One mission, one mountain, one impossible circumstance at a time. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories.